So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our November Segal convening with Tom Broussard. Tom wears many hats and has in the past, including being the inaugural director of the Segal Citizen Leadership Program, as well as having gotten his Ph.D. at Heller in 2006, and also having been an associate dean at Heller for career services and mission between 2007 and 2011. And he's been not just a founder of the Segal program, but an ongoing supporter. So we're really honored, Tom, that you're here today to talk with us about aphasia awareness and action, swimming upstream in the ocean of healthcare needs. There was a lot of interest from folks who also couldn't join us today, so we will be recording the session. And I think Tom's goal is to hopefully have at least 5, if not 10 minutes for questions at the end. So thank you for being with us, Tom, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Carmina, if I've got that right, and I know I didn't. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to have the PowerPoint's going to come up, but as Susie said and Carmina said, I've had lots of different hats, but I'm really have always been thrilled to be a Brandeis and a Heller grad. It's been since 1999 when I was a special student. And you could go for 2 classes in a year and not be admitted yet. So I did take 2 classes. One was with our dean back then, and one with David Gill. And that was 1999. And it's really quite amazing that after all these years, 23 years of being part of Brandeis. But I'll get the slide up because I'm almost immediately going to start to talk as if I was just talking with anybody out on the street. If I'm going to be talking the way I normally do, which is even before my stroke, I used to talk a lot anyway. Now, after my stroke, having lost my language, unable to read, write, or speak well, now, obviously, even today, this is my practice, as it were, although it's really just learning like anything else, but it's a lot of practice to make it work. But I am thrilled, actually, to have people coming to learn more about aphasia, which is what we're going to be talking about and what happened with me. And what's much more important is what's going to happen in the future if we don't do a bunch of things about people with stroke and aphasia, because there are millions and millions of people in the United States, just the United States, with aphasia. All right, so I'm going to go to share, and we'll get this going. All right, can you see this? Yeah, so I can't see you, so unfortunately I won't be able to see you smiling or laughing or clapping, but you have to make some noise so I'll know that you're seeing stuff or I'm having problems moving the slide.
We do see it.
Okay, got it. All right, got it. This is the outline, as it were. I'm going to talk about my story a little bit. Then we're going to go on with really helping people better understand why it's so important to understand a lot more about aphasia, what's behind that, which is plasticity, and behind that is why the wider world doesn't know about aphasia, but beyond that doesn't know about plasticity, which is the foundation of all learning. And a lot of that comes from either being a scientist and studying the way the brain works, or you get it from people like me whose brain was damaged, but not so much that I couldn't gather it all back together again and be able to express to you what I had been working through this process, obviously with plasticity. Talk about the missing link and all the other things that you see there in terms of the lived experience of people with stroke and aphasia, of which, because it's often referred to as an invisible disease, because since we couldn't talk or read or write, then clearly we're invisible, and that is all part of how all this works. As you heard it before, I was the associate dean at the Heller School, believe it or not. Fell down on Main Street. That's Main Street. If you actually take a look on Main Street, you get to see the restaurant in the back. That I think that building on the right is still there. I think that rusty pole is still there, empty. But my wife and I were walking down the street. She was ahead of me, so she didn't see what was happening at the moment. The last thing I remembered was looking at my shoes. And I remember even to this day, looking at my shoes, because that's the last thing I remembered. My wife did turn around and saw that I was crawling from the street, because I was actually in the street, to the yellow pole, and then starting to crawl to the white pole. And she came back and said, "You must be having a stroke." But at that point, I had no idea. But we're outside of Boston, obviously, in Waltham, so it was really easy to get to the hospital pretty quickly. The stroke happened about 8:30 in the evening on that Monday, and they got me there within an hour. They did all the assessments fairly quickly, and by about 10:30, two hours after I got there, I got the TPA, that particular kind of drug that dissolved the clot, which I had on the left side of my brain in the Broca's area, right about here. Of course, I didn't know any of that at the time. But when I did get that drug, I woke up, apparently, I say that because that's what everybody else saw, with a vengeance, started screaming, and I was hitting my head on the left side. As it turns out, that drug is very powerful, and clearly the clot bubbles were bursting on the inside, and I could hear all this noise so much that I was screaming what the nurses called word salad. And my wife saw it all, and she wondered, and it was only later, because I remembered what was happening. And it was months later when I could express that to my wife, and she said, "Oh, that's what happened. We had no idea. They had to strap me so that I wouldn't hurt myself, given all that noise and confusion I was doing." So that's how it really started. And that was also the end of me being the dean there at Heller. This is a definition of aphasia. Most of you can read that, but I'll read it for you. It's always good for me to practice reading it out loud too. Aphasia is an acquired brain injury, and it is an impairment of language affecting the production or comprehension of speech and the ability to read or write. Aphasia can be severe, making communication almost impossible, or it can be very mild. In my particular case, I have what is called expressive aphasia, and definitely nowhere as severe as many of my friends who start out mute. I was quite fluent, had additional aphasia symptoms, basically using words that aren't the words they meant to be, so paraphasia, but was still relatively fluent speaking. I was really had a hard time writing and could not read. So that's the beginning of me. Being as mild as it was, I still couldn't read at all, and I could write, but it turns out what I was writing didn't make any sense. We'll get to see that as we go forward. But it was interesting that Wendy mentioned this, because I'm thrilled to talk more about this exact same thing. I've been looking for a college or graduate school that have an interest in aphasia, other than as if you are a therapist. I'm not a therapist. I'm really looking at the social policy of stroke and aphasia. So I have been looking for, especially the Heller School, but hearing from Wendy, that's very helpful. Because what you get here, given that there are millions, I mentioned millions of people in the United States with aphasia, you get to see some that you've heard of before. Gabby Gifford, of course, was shot and has aphasia. We'll talk more about what aphasia really means, depending on the different kinds of diseases and disorders we're going to talk about. Bruce Willis has what the clinicians would describe as primary progressive aphasia. In the press, you will only see the word aphasia, unless you found another article that says more than that. And they will talk about other neurological problems, but in reading it, clearly primary progressive aphasia is a neurodegenerative disease. It's a brain disease. It's completely different from the kind of aphasia that I'm talking about, whether it be receptive or global or expressive. But because they use that word aphasia, then the press has issues as well. So this is a bigger thing than just somebody happening to have aphasia and thinking that that's all we're talking about is the physical neurological components of aphasia, but also the press, education, and the wider public. And then you get to John Fetterman, who happens to say what I'm going to say is expressive aphasia. His staff doesn't use the word aphasia at all. They've actually said, oh, John doesn't have aphasia. He has aphasia. He happens to have among the symptoms we all have in terms of auditorial disorders, of which I've written about, and I've sent that to him so that he could read that. But that isn't what he has. He actually has aphasia, and we'll get to talk about that too. And then me is a good example of someone when you're beginning to see more of a continuum of people with aphasia. Gabby Gifford was mute at the very beginning and had years and years of practice to get to the point where she can now, with a lot of practice and repetition, be able to sing and talk and communicate well. Bruce Willis, of course, his language will continue to degrade. He won't get better because it just, again, the ecology of this is quite different. And John Fetterman, given his age and where it is in his brain and how he's been doing so far, the trajectory so far is that he will continue to improve tremendously. And in my case, it's been 11 years. So that's a lot of work, although the first 4 years come in stages. From awareness to being able to read, write, and speak took about 4 years. And now I continue to practice going forward. And this is another good slide because you get to see that aphasia is loss of language, but not intellect. And a lot of people, again, the press, the wider public will assume that this thing called aphasia is a loss of language and loss of intellect, which is not the case. We just can't communicate what we otherwise want to express. And then recovery, and for the most part, my work is working with metaphors so people can better understand what is otherwise obviously more difficult unless you're a scientist with all kinds of words that are incredibly difficult to pronounce, whether you have a stroke or not. But my books and my work helps you understand. And this is the greatest metaphor we use now, of course, is photosynthesis, is that process that converts sunlight into green leaves. Plasticity converts thought, and it might as well be sunlight, and cognitive activities, reading, writing, and speaking, into new brain matter. Because people, again, like me, I mean, I was an engineer for 20 years, then a business person for 15, then got into education, then got to the Heller School. If you put all those together, you would say I'd look like I'm 110, given how many years I've been working on all these different things. Not at that point realizing what my big research question would be as a research person at Heller. But at Heller itself, while I was working there, I was still thinking about what I was working with. And of course, my expertise back then was working with people with disabilities and employment. And of course, then I was disabled and had to look for employment after my stroke. So all of this comes together to realize that the biggest and the final tool I really needed to work on my research question is aphasia and how the brain and how we really do rewire the brain based on the fuel for all of that, which does that conversion, which is the activities themselves. And as I said, it starts with me writing a diary. A lot of the work I did when I was still at that acute stage were completely accidental. It was just my habit. And I say, unfortunately, but I don't mean that. Fortunately, my habit drove me to do all these kinds of activities that ended up, what I found out later, were highly therapeutic. So I wrote what turned out to be a 500-page diary. That's right there in front of you. And for the first 200 pages, I was writing words that didn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to me or to you. You get to see some of my entries. But most of the words are spelled properly. They just were mixed up, right? They just didn't make the kind of sense you would want them to be. So that too is part of it, because part of my getting better, it didn't matter how bad the product was. The activity is the fuel. I had to write constantly every day, had to speak constantly badly every day, pronouncing people's name like Carmina. See, so you have to keep practicing. So it is the activity itself, and any one of the 10 principles of plasticity, including one happens to be called repetition. I didn't mention before, because why did I get my stroke? I had open heart surgery 3 months before my stroke, quadruple bypass and aortic valve replacement. After my stroke, I had just gone back to Heller about a week before. So I'd already started my therapeutic walking because of my heart issues, then had the stroke, and then had to start walking again later. And this is how I started walking and started, quote, reading. Even though I couldn't read, I could read individual words like a stop sign or road work ahead. But once I got into more difficult signs, then I couldn't read them. And through all of that, as an engineer and as a researcher on the inside, I thought, there's something wrong. And it seems that it doesn't have much to do with the words themselves. And this is a good example. There was a church there in Waltham, and I would walk past it almost every day and started taking pictures, because I would take pictures with my phone and bring it to my wife and say, tell me what this means. And she would say it out loud. And I'd say, I don't understand why I can't say that word, this land that unites. Although if it was just the word this, I could understand this. Land, I can understand that. But you put them together, it turns out, of course, that the grammar and syntax is what's broken, and the coupling between those words and the intelligence that goes into that is all part of the damage that was done, not so much the words themselves, although some of the words also have problems. Again, using my phone, again, because it was my habit. Nobody told me to do this. Actually, one scientist in University of Virginia several years ago was in my audience and came up after me, and she said, so do you still have your recordings? I have 202 recordings, about 10 hours of my voice. And I said, yes, I do. And she said, can we have it? She said, as far as we know, it's never been done before that somebody recorded their voice for 2 years, and we want it. And way back then, we did a big work at the UVA, and they did their work, and it has now finally made its way into the classrooms. So the students who are working on getting their master's in speech language, they can pick any number of my recordings and then study them and be able to now have a new article about one thing or another. And actually one has finally made us all the way in. I didn't put a slide here, but you get to see how well I was doing over that year based on what they were studying, my voice, not how bad it was, but they could tell which of those words were making sense and which didn't, and how they were making more sense as time went by. So all that is very interesting. But I did record all of that, and it took a couple of years to have them transcribed. But if this works, hopefully you will get to hear what I was saying at the time, if it's still working. Here we go. In such a way that the combination of both necessarily produce a materially compatibly deletes of units thought characteristic by nature is made precisely by this process
of sedimentation. And what happens is neither a sign formation of thoughts into matter, nor a foundation of signs into ideas.
You can, and then you see on the right, you can see what came out of that book. Because I was trying to actually read and record and see how I was doing. Again, I didn't really know what it looked like until it was transcribed, and that took me years to get to. But I had found a verbatim transcriber. There aren't that many. Most of them are in Hollywood, and that's where I found one. So she recorded them all and transcribed them all, including many you get to see, you can hear, she'll say, there's a truck in the background, leaves are rustling, all kinds of information, including what I was saying. So it's very, very helpful. And this too will make its way into another one of my books. Of course, I've been using plasticity, otherwise called neuroplasticity, and then otherwise called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. And the experience-dependent component is how plasticity converts the experience-dependent, those activities, into new brain matter. And in the several months, actually 6 months, that I was working with an independent speech language person, as well as a group out of BU at the time for another 4 months, I was building what turned out to be a therapeutic structure. And you're looking at that structure. I was doing all of those things, writing almost every day in my diary, recording my voice, reading as best I could, taking pictures of the world around me. That was very important. And of course, doing the exercise and eventually the stroke group. But what I didn't realize, and what I now urge the clinicians to do, is build this structure, because your therapy is going to end fairly quickly. I mean, I was really lucky. I had really good insurance, 30 sessions seems to be good. They turned out to be twice a week, 30 minutes each. That's an hour a week for 15 weeks. That is how much therapy I got, 15 hours of formal therapy plus 20 some over at BU in a group situation. But when it comes to the experience-dependent component of that, it takes thousands and thousands of hours. And the speech therapy people, what they really do is help steer us, getting us ready to go forward. But there's more that they need to do, including telling us from the beginning, because none of this, I was never told, oh, Tom, you should do this, and this. They don't do that. I do encourage them now, and they've known me now around the country for a long time. You need to tell us that, because if you haven't told us, Tom, you'll get better if you do these things. They don't tell us that either. They just do those things. And then they take quizzes to see how I am doing, how anybody is doing. Tell us at the beginning, if you do these things, because it really took, and that first year, I counted 1,700 hours that first year against the 50 hours that I got from the individual and the group. So at the end of that time, the only thing happens if you build this structure is that formal therapy leaves. But now you have the structure to go forward with. Again, all this happened because of my habit. I'm now trying to urge the clinicians to help develop the habitual structure that can help people do this for as long as they need to. And it does take years. This is a good slide. It's a little video of what plasticity looks like. And although we talk about plasticity as if it is when people are damaged and have stroke injuries, that's what plasticity is. But the truth is, plasticity works whether you're healthy or not. So anything you do, even this presentation, when it comes to plasticity, it is converting your listening, thinking, making notes, remembering. That is what is happening. It has converted all of those activities, cognitive activities, into new brain matter, developing more what are called dendrites and synapses, but otherwise metaphorically, we'd call them branches and leaves, as you saw in that photo synthesis metaphorical slide. So this is what it looks like, and this is this video, and I'll do it twice because it's a very, very short few seconds. You get to see what these cells, and they look exactly like that. That's what a neuron looks like. And you see those branches as they are trying to connect. And that is what thoughts looks like. And this is a human alive with video. Now I'm going to do it again, because now start to focus on which of those branches are clearly growing, moving in the direction of another cell, because cells, as powerful as they are on themselves, they're quite ignorant. So all the cells we have, the neurons, the brain cells, basically, the cells we had from the stroke are gone. They're never going to come back. But they do have this amazing ability to grow new branches with the remaining cells, which are all quite healthy. You know, this acquired brain injury comes as a result of a blow, basically, or the stroke itself starving oxygen. But the remaining cells are just as healthy as they were before, although some of them are quite sick for a little bit. But they are now starting to grow and making and remaking the connections that they used to have. And that's why we call it rewiring. But hopefully you watch this again and look and see how they are all trying to grow and connect with other cells in the area. I really do like those little cells. But as I said at the beginning, at the title, Fish Can't See Water. If you've seen that book before, obviously it's a cultural title because fish can't see water because they just don't know, and hospitals can't see aphasia because they don't know. They don't see what surrounds them now. And here are some good examples of that over the years, as various people, myself included, who have been studying hospitals, when we began to realize that the stroke-centered hospitals don't really think about aphasia because they don't have to. They are designed to be very good at what they do. I don't press them at all. I love them all for what they do, but we're realizing that the system doesn't allow those particular hospitals, the stroke-centered hospitals, to also at least expose people about aphasia as opposed to not, and we'll talk about that. But you can see here, 2.6 people in the United States and North America have this thing that people hardly hear about called aphasia. This big report was done in 2018, describing it, as it says here, insufficient awareness, and this is the #1 goal. This is the #1 gap in this paper: insufficient awareness and knowledge of aphasia in healthcare providers and the wider public. The National Aphasia Association did a study, and they do a study every 5 years. The last time was 8.8%. Actually, the newest one, the 2021, is 7.7%. It's gone down, whatever that could possibly mean. But it is because it's so invisible. People just don't know about it. And the hospitals, unfortunately, don't do anything to urge people to know more about it. I did a study in Florida, as you see there, it was really 23 hospitals, out of which 20 had no information about aphasia, including one hospital where I've been speaking there and going to see them, went with the president of that hospital, brought my laptop, showed on his website, put in this word aphasia and says, "We are sorry, no results were found." And I had some of my books. He was aghast. He had no idea, right? Now, this is several years ago. The hospital is still there, of course, about to be acquired. new president, nothing in there about aphasia at all, even though it is a primary stroke-centered hospital. And then it ends there, of course, that such a huge component of the people that are disabled from stroke have aphasia. You're talking 25 to 40% of people actually have aphasia. And that too is another interesting thing, given that the people that are discharged actually leave without even knowing that they actually have this particular disorder with them. There are, and these are the most recent sets of information, over 5,000 hospitals in the country that are stroke centered. I'm sorry, that are total. And then out of that, about half of them are stroke centered hospitals. Other hospitals are still in the process of trying to be stroke centered. It takes a couple of years to be accredited by the Joint Commission. And as you see there, it looks like it's fairly stable for the last couple of years, about 800,000 people with strokes, and at least 180,000 people have aphasia. The disposition, stroke disposition at discharge is another component of this cascading effect of not knowing. About a third of all people with stroke that are discharged are moved to inpatient rehab facilities, specialized nursing facilities, obviously people that are more severe with their stroke. And they, if that happens and they're there, they might also have speech language pathology therapists working with them too. But 2/3 of those discharged typically then go home. Which is to say that they are not as damaged enough to go back into inpatients, but they end up home waiting for months, easily up to 6 months or forever. In my case, just 1 month. But that means that for all of that time, you're sitting at home, not knowing anything, not giving anything, not providing with any information from the entity that is the one who got you ready, got you healthy enough to go home, but unaware that you're not healthy enough to deal with the fact that you have this thing called aphasia. So that too continues to be a big social issue, given that we're talking a lot of people, more than you can possibly imagine. We do have a couple of studies going on, one in Dallas. Matter of fact, I think I have it here, that are in the Dallas area. We're talking 50,000 people with aphasia annually because of the size of the population, and the therapist people who treat people are in the hundreds. So 50,000 people with aphasia, but because of the whole system not particularly working terribly well, you end up with a couple hundred being treated. So it's a huge problem. And these are the reasons why the missing link. Stroke-centered hospitals are designed to do what it does physically, but the next step comes only later. As I said, that they really don't think they need to educate us because it's not their job. Their job is to get you ready for rehab. That's exactly what happened with me. I had that drug that got me physically ready to go, but I was still there, and I kept asking whatever I was asking and whatever words I was using. Thought I wanted to go home, and I said, it's okay. You'll go home soon, and you'll go to rehab soon. But they never talked about aphasia. And given that this is Massachusetts General Hospital, you guys know where that is. Yeah, this is what happened while I was there. It is the rehab facilities. They are the ones who have the responsibility for the communication needs. However, they don't know who we are until we're admitted to them. So if it's 6 months later, you walk in 6 months post-stroke, have no idea that for 6 months you could have been getting better. You probably have been doing it because it's nature that you will continue to get better, but you'll be getting better quicker if you are told you have it, and here are the activities you need to drive the fuel to create the new brain matter. Yeah, you go for months, I have no idea, and that's the way it's going to be. As I say here, the senders and receivers, the stroke people and the rehab people, they're very good at what they do, but there's this gap in between between these two highly siloed entities, obviously disrupting the continuity of care for people with aphasia. What we are doing at Aphasia Nation is educating the people and eventually changing the system. And here, so far, is what we're working on. Websites where it's really obviously and visible. Every presentation I make, I ask my host, please check your website and tell me what you know about what you have. Well, of course, I already do that before I get in, and I'm waiting to hear what they tell me. More than once, they won't tell me because they all do check. And finally, someone in their audience says, hey, what's going on with that? And the host says, well, I'm sorry to tell you, I checked. We don't have anything on our website. And yet we're there having this presentation at their hospital about aphasia. So website is highly visible. That's one of the things we need to do first. That is the thing we need to do first. Well, a few other things too. Literature, very little literature at the hospital or at discharge, very few. And if there is, it is about a stroke and very little about aphasia, if at all. Database, the same thing happens there too. Everything we know in the healthcare community is all about the codes, right? The very few codes that are addressed to aphasia, and typically what you do is that there's a note, if a note is presented at all in the remarks about aphasia, but most of them don't really do much about aphasia because it's something they don't need to care about, including the people I talk to at hospitals when they are working hard to figure this out. But I know it's incredibly tough at hospitals given the world that we all live with. So I do think there's some other things we can do to try to save everybody time and money, to just get the information into the website and into the literature that I can provide. And then communication, community education is also needed. So a lot has to change in this cultural system, but that's why it's fish can't see water and hospitals can't see aphasia. And these are our goals at this point, providing information in the website. Of course, we have to build relationships with all those 2,500 hospitals, typically through the resident speech language pathology and to the stroke coordinators, which are very important cogs in that wheel. And most people on any end of this continuum don't know anything about the stroke coordinators, which is this big cog. So people have to learn that too, as I've been trying to do with SLPs who also don't know about stroke coordinators in the same building. Providing materials about aphasia, like the ABCs of aphasia, which I wrote for this exact same purpose. Providing education to the staff and everybody in the community. And of course, coding and collecting and using the information so we actually can do more studies about what is going on about this huge deficit that the world is well aware of. I do lots of work in India too, and unfortunately from their perspective, they don't have any kind of system that we have as disconjointed as ours is here. They have less than that in India, and obviously 4 times the number of people. And our current activities, really building that database first. If you can only imagine if you had 2,500 hospitals and you had the name of what kind of hospital it is, what kind of certification, the names of every stroke coordinator and their lead SLPs and a local person, put them together into a team, figure this out. Just building that database is a huge part of our work right now. And then, of course, contacting those folks there and getting into the screening committee for the stroke steering committee to include adding more information about aphasia and continue to work on this public facing infrastructure in every possible way going forward. So it does help that we have more well-known people like Gavin Gifford and John Fetterman, Bruce Willis. So we do getting a lot more information out in the press, but they're just little jabs along the way we need to build that infrastructure to make this work on a day-to-day basis for the millions, not just for the few. And from our perspective anyway, the lived experience, because there's lots and lots of us, millions and millions of us, and we do get better every day. Many of my friends who started out as mute, and we keep track of words in meetings we've been in for years, and now get to the point where we all, now they can speak reasonably well, still with difficulty, but going from mute to that, we get to see just how the brain is incredible. But it all has to do with our lived experiences going forward. So I'll read this, but I know you guys can all read it too, and faster than I'm reading it for you. But lived experience of stroke survivors and people with aphasia helps inform social policy change. We're sort of the tail and the dog. People with aphasia are committed to living this way everywhere we can, because it's part of how we get better, because otherwise a lot of people typically are alone and really shunned because they really can't communicate, such that that's where you end up being. So the more of us who are become more engaged with our world, we get better at it, and we realize that we should continue to do this at every possible sector and using our lived expertise as highly, highly useful. So I've been speaking at, it's fair to say, hundreds of colleges around the country, and all those students, as I tell them all, you're going to graduate and you're going to have to know more about what I'm telling you, because you won't hear it from your teachers, who I all know very well, and they will say that too. It's 2 years to work hard to get the right jobs, to get the right information, to get to those jobs. But there's so much more that comes from people that actually have lived with it and can now express what we couldn't express before, as we have moved to become what we call ourselves change makers, just like you do in the Segal world as well. So it was wonderful to see Susie a few months ago and come to this understanding that maybe there is something that we can do between Segal and Aphasia Nation and my work to help us better understand with more experienced people in the Segal Heller world, as Aphasia Nation works on what we're working on to make this all happen. Yeah, and we need more states that have more plates like this, because here in Maine, or when I'm in Boston, or wherever I am, basically anybody who sees it, they come right up to you and say, "What is that? Tell me." I have no idea what that is. So this is always great for us, but so far we only have 6 states so far that have put up a vanity plate for aphasia. I will unshare, and then we can have questions going forward. Yes. Look at that. Larry's here. Somebody I can see. I mean, no. Face.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. And we did have a few people join us, and I see some virtual clapping on the screen, but it's so powerful. You talked just at the end there about leveraging lived experience to make public health changes, and the depth of what you shared about your own experience and how you have leveraged your own experience to make change for millions is so inspiring. As you know, as the inaugural Segal Program Director, that's what the Segal Program is about, helping people make a difference and leverage change. And your example of taking your experience with stroke and aphasia into starting your own nonprofit of Aphasia Nation and keeping making change for other people is so inspiring. So I'm so glad you left time for Q&A, and we'll open it up to folks. You can either type into the chat if you don't want to be on audio in the recording, or feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand.
Yes. Yes.
Tom, one of the things that struck me was the disconnect between hospital and rehab facilities, especially for those 2/3 patients. And you mentioned that there is no coding, no codes for aphasia in hospitals for those who are admitted for onset of stroke. And but there is coding for stroke. And we know that coding, which is reimbursement driven, it is a major driver for what gets done and what gets communicated. So I was wondering about, let's take the example of Mass Journal, and it is following rehab. So they are, one could say they are same entity as far as revenue streams. And so how would it affect Mass General or motivate Mass General to code for the therapy, speech therapy and other things that for patients who are eventually seen and provided therapy in Spalding, for example? And how would that be a motivator for hospitals to pay greater attention to this?
Right, I agree. I think they actually have some codes that could lead you to understanding about aphasia and certainly about speech therapy. That's there. What I'm hearing is that although they have it, they don't use it. So when I ask them to pull a report, they say, we're going to take a lot more work to get to that point, because they do have the info, or at least enough of the info that can actually lead us to understanding that. So yes, I agree with what you're saying, that there are some big highways from MGH to Spalding as a good example, because a huge amount goes over there, of course, actually from around New England. But to have people at Maine General and Spalding and people like me in the same room to say, okay, what do you or don't you have? Here I sit in the middle. What do you get when you get it from MGH and other places? How can we make this be more smoother in the transition, of course, but also a lot of this, the smoothing is to put more information up front. But the upfront is the beginning, middle, and end of an entity. I'm in another entity, and they're at this entity with a couple wires that go across sending information. So yes, I agree. We need to, that's part of what has to be done, I think, is build even some examples. And this could be a good example with MGH and Spalding as an example.
And I must say that you have, in a way, re-engineered yourself, your language spoken abilities after your stroke, and I think that's a very it's a very remarkable and admirable thing you have done. I suspect not everybody who has the same background as yourself may do the same, and there's something I think very admirable about you and the family that you have around yourself, especially your wife, perhaps, who enable this re-engineering of yourself, like the number of hours and all the information that you shared about what you put into it to get where you are. It's just remarkable.
Wow, thank you. I've been told this before, and I always have to tell them, yes, but it's completely by accident. I know it's not an accident, but it all started a long time ago. Like I always say, from my dad. You know, it's just the way people are. But I do appreciate the testimonial. I do. Wendy, do you have a comment?
Oh, sorry.
No, I didn't know if Wendy had a question.
My question was how you experience self from before and after having gone through this. and how you feel like is your thinking different? I'm thinking more in terms of process and experience.
Well, it was very interesting because especially at the beginning, when I say the beginning for me is 11 months, because I became more aware at an event, a mental event at 11 months when I actually could, for the first time, could see that first entry that you got to see. That was 11 months when I first had that experience, and I realized that I could now see the difference between what was good and what was bad. And I wrote it down in my diary as fast as I could. I said, telling the world, if I don't write this down, I'll forget it in a minute, that the world will never know what I have seen. So that is written in my book. It ends book 1 at 11 months. So when I say that, that's in the beginning. So in the beginning, when I couldn't, well, I was expressing, but I didn't know how bad it looked. On the inside, as an engineer, I was really trying to figure out, okay, I was a shipbuilder. So I was actually thinking, oh, shipbuildings, we build ships with little bits of steel, then bigger bits, and then pieces and parts and assemblies, sub-assemblies, right, building it up. And that's why I thought, oh, something must be wrong with my head, with my language, because we must have to build things like that. So I thought of it metaphorically the entire time, trying to figure out what I thought was going to work, thought, okay, that's not going to work. And I come up with a new way of metaphorically understanding until I came to understanding what I now help people better understand. But so my thinking, I think, was good. I just couldn't express. And even today, sometimes I get a little bit too much around the barn, trying to say what I really want to say and have to redo it a few other times. But yeah, it was an interesting process, that's for sure.
In the chat, Madeline Smith-Gibbs says, thank you for such an educational and enlightening talk. Speaking from your own experience, do you have any tips, do's or don'ts for communicating with people with aphasia?
Oh, communicating with somebody with aphasia. That's a good question. As you have probably seen, is to have patience. When it comes to patience, that's for all of us, whether you're healthy or not. You have to be patient, because what you see is a person with a huge amount of pause. You can actually see in their body language that they're struggling. You can see the word struggle in their face. Well, don't leap in. Don't just say, oh, you mean this? Did you mean this? Don't do that. So you have to be incredibly patient. That'd be one of them. We have a big, long list, but patience is a huge one for that exact reason. And don't talk louder. Even me at the beginning, people are talking really loud. Can you understand? Oh my God, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But again, this is all of us. What did I know? I didn't know anything, right? Before my stroke, maybe I was talking too loud. I have no idea, because I'd never experienced anybody with a stroke. So yes, this is all part of educating the community. Again, isn't necessarily about stroke per se, but like the question asked there by Madeline, patient works for all of us. So let's have a discussion about patience. And then we'll move into understanding more about why it's so important, why it's so extra important for people with aphasia. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the great questions. Thank you, Carmela, for keeping an eye on the chat and for all your help to prepare for today. Carmela Bellows is the Segal Program Assistant Director. And Tom, as we said before, and other people said it in their comments, you are an inspiration. What you've been through and how you navigated that as an inspiration, and that you've leveraged it to make change and to have your own nonprofit, Aphasia Nation Inc. is so inspiring. And so it's great to be able to reconnect with you as the inaugural Segal Program Director, and a longtime part of the Heller community. And it's wonderful to think, much as you showed us the brain cells growing of all the connections with the people on the call today, and how we can stretch and reach and connect to other people to connect with you.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I hope if anybody is interested, please send me an email. and we can get started, because I do want to find a school that will help me with this exact same issue on the social policy side of things.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been an honor from the Segal program, from the Heller School, and from Brandeis to have you with us. That's such an inspiration. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Nice to see everybody. Have a good weekend. Take
Thank
care.
you, Tom.
Bye-bye.